Hi, I'm Dr. Stan Steindl. Welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt. Today I'm so pleased to be welcoming back Shannon Swales, who's a psychologist, writer, podcast host and compassionate guide to so many midlife women navigating burnout, overwhelm and complex transitions of this life stage. Shannon is the founder of Burnout Psychology Support, host of the Midlife Reclaimed podcast, and author of Nothing Left to Give, A Psychologist's Path Back from Burnout. Shannon first joined me on the 15th of July 2023, where she shared her own deeply personal journey through burnout and recovery. This time she returns to Compassion in a T-shirt to speak about the heart of her work, supporting others through the slow, meaningful process of coming home to themselves. We explore the burnout experience, the particular challenges of midlife for women, and how compassion, especially self-compassion, can become a powerful ally on the path to healing and renewal. And so I bring you Shannon Swales. Shannon Swales, welcome back to Compassion in a T-shirt.
Thank you for having me back, Stan. I'm very excited to have this conversation and feel privileged to be back as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, you work closely with midlife women who are often, I guess, deeply capable, but sort of quietly depleted. What do you think is happening in this particular life stage that makes burnout, I suppose, such a common and often hidden experience for women?
Yeah, so many things, Stan. I think the first and foremost that always comes to mind that I didn't realize as a midlife woman going through burnout is perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, that we're going through this neuroendocrine systemic change, and it's having an effect on lots of areas, not just physically but psychologically as well, with anxiety and even our mood changes as well. So there's that's happening for midlife women, and often they're not aware. I think the conversation's only really starting in that area, which is great because they'll hopefully make help women become more aware, especially the women coming up to this age group. And it can start anywhere from like mid-30s as well. And for some women, it'll be quite symptomatic, and for others, it's not, or less so. So there's that. But then also midlife is such a huge developmental shift as well. Like it's a stage of our development. And I often hear midlife women, including myself, having, questions like, who am I? Like, what am I doing here in this world? Is this what I want to be continuing doing? There's a lot of, I suppose, in a way, quite existential questions as well. Like also like awareness that life is partly over. I know that sounds a bit doom and gloom, but like I know I was hitting 40s, the early 40s, I'm mid 40s now, and I was like, there was this awareness that, oh, geez, I've grandparents that lived to 80s, 90s, some unfortunately only 70s, but there's an awareness of your life changing and evolving. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is often it gets called more the cumulative effect of it can be, behavioral patterns. So let's say, perfectionism, people pleasing. It can be a cumulative effect of living up to other people's expectations or cultural expectations of success. Cumulative effects of just your body and under the strain and stress that she's been through for 40 odd years. There's just a cumulative pattern as well that can make us more at risk of burning out, and if not other things as well. So yeah.
It's such a time of change, I guess, isn't it? It's the physiological hormonal changes that kind of start to sort of sneak in, maybe 30s, but 40s and 50s and so on. And then there's changes around identity and role and what is my purpose here, or kind of going forward and that sort of stuff. And then there's the accumulative stuff. I thought at first you were going to refer to just a lot's happened by the time one
Mm,
reaches midlife. And so there's an
mm,
accumulation of life experiences, I guess, and that sort of thing. But there's also what you were talking about, which is more an accumulation of little quirks or habits or certain cognitive styles or other
mm,
bits and pieces, perfectionism or self-criticism that have been
mm,
accumulated along the way
mm,
as well. And yet
mm.
it's often so uh, sort of unspoken or unmentioned, or I really have noticed and feel hopeful about the way that it's become more a part of the conversation, but it
Mm,
is only quite recent.
mm.
It's been kind of people have had to quietly cope with these sorts of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, you speak to like I've spoken to my mother, my mother-in-law, just anyone in that 70, 60, and some of the midlife women that I see that and talk to who are post-menopause now, and so some in their 60s or late 50s, and like we didn't get any of this, that we quietly, went about it or didn't even know what was going on. And even going to the services to get help and varying degrees of support, but even that was lacking. And so yeah, when you speak to that older generation um, of women, you just shocked,
Mm,
but not surprised, but not shocked. I don't know, either or. Like, because you're like,
yes.
well, I have an awareness. The conversation isn't, didn't happen, or wasn't happening for them. But just hearing it, it breaks your heart. Like, that they had to go through that.
Mm,
Um, it sucks, but I love what you said before. There's change. Change is happening. I mean, that
mm.
this time in life is a change, but that change is happening systemically to support that.
Mm. And people can just feel burnt out, I suppose, or
Mm,
kind of that depleted idea. There's a bit of a narrative around burnout that it sort of, or maybe it runs the risk of overemphasizing
mm,
overwork and poor self-care or something like that. And but
mm.
your work suggests something a bit deeper than that. Like, how do you
Yeah.
understand burnout, I guess, and at this
Mm,
time of life, but through a psychological lens?
mm. Well, when I started to really deep dive into the research, try and understand burnout, I think something I was really seeing that I hadn't seen before or really understood was the more systemic factors that contribute to burnout. Like I was thinking of just the individual factors, like I'm working myself to the bone, like I have this, and I see this a lot in midlife women. We've got the push, and men actually, push mentality, that our self-care is often quite poor. We just don't have the energy for it, even if we have the knowledge and awareness. Uh, but that looking into the research, it really opened up my eyes that all of these, and I think we know this needs to be part of the conversation, and it's starting to, is the systemic things, like workplace factors. One of the interesting things that I have, just through talking to others and working with others, is like there's this type of burnout where, well, it's not a type, but a causal factor where it's that they're feeling understimulated, that they feel disconnected from what they're doing, or worse, that there's a values mismatch, like between what they're doing and what they believe in, and that's contributing to that chronic stress load that is causing that burnout, that exhaustion as well. And that's often not talked about. So therefore, people that I see are often quite flabbergasted in a way that, oh, I'm burnt out, because they thought, oh, well, that's more to do with being, your workload being really, huge, or the, just other factors other than that. So
Mm.
yeah, the understimulated, the values mismatch is often one not spoken about. And I think in this midlife area where you often see this shift, not with everybody, but the shift to more wanting to, like, more meaning, more purpose rather than achievement or getting somewhere. It's more being aligned with what matters. So I think that that's almost like a perfect marriage there for burnout. For a midlife person, I'll include men in that, like, to experience burnout in this stage. Um, and I just feel like coming back to the systemic, the other thing that I noticed in the research, and it might be out there and I just haven't found it yet, but cultural aspects, like I don't feel like that's in the conversation in the research. It's organizational factors, it's individual, but cultural, like our how we operate as a culture, our gender expectations, our expectations around work, family, home, these all play a role in someone burning out. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
Yes, there's sort of there's so much to the context or the contextual factors there, isn't there? The systems that we live and work in, and the
Mm.
various kind of roles that we take and expectations that we have of well, sometimes that we have of ourselves, or expectations maybe that are placed upon us. It can be
Mm.
the overstimulation or the understimulation end of the spectrum, but often
Yeah.
there's that values, meaning kind of aspect
Mm.
to it as well that kind of gets sort of missed, I suppose, and the cultural
Yeah.
piece too, and the family piece too, I imagine. I mean, I'm certainly noticing
Mm.
that I'm as a midlife man, or I suppose I'm in that sort of middle between aging parents and sort of
Mm.
young adult children who are slightly running amok, and so like there's a bit of a squeeze,
Yeah.
sort of in terms of just the age and where you're at, maybe family wise and things like that.
Yeah, well, our roles, yeah, like there's often a lot more that we're holding in terms of in our family roles. You know, that sandwich generation, as you mentioned, like we can be looking after our elderly parents, but also still taking care of our kids. And, you know, people are, not everyone, but some people are having, you know, kids later in life. So they could be still looking after young kids while
Mm,
also, and at work often, you know, depending on where you're at, but you can be holding more of a senior level position. There might be a lot more expectations or a lot more responsibilities in that era as well. And that all, you know, has that ability to load us up with stress. Yeah.
mm.
Mm. Mm.
To that point about values, I guess, and meaning and that sort of thing, many women might arrive in therapy, say, even, and sort of, how did I get here, sort of thing. How did I find
Mm.
myself, so far away from some of those aspects of who I am, or who I have been, or who I
Mm.
would really sort of want to be, or what's important to me. And
Mm.
what is it that might help women to begin the journey home to themselves, so to speak, back to their
Yeah.
own voice, that energy, that sense of meaning and worth,
Mm.
value?
Yeah. Yeah. Such a because it just makes me think of all the women that I do see, and it's often they're like, "Yeah, how did I get so far away from myself?" Or, yeah, they might use different words, different language. It was certainly my personal experience as well, not everyone's, but yeah. And go like, "How did I land here?" But uh, in thinking about this, for me, it's sort of coming back to the sort of contextual aspect, but just more having an environment in which they can go to start to reconnect themselves. And I think that's what's so beautiful about therapy, because that in itself is an environment in which they can be held and they can explore and come back to themselves with that trained therapist to do so. And that's something I try and endeavor to do. So often I'm sharing that with, you know, the client, that this can be a space to help you start to reconnect. But then also looking at spaces outside of the session as well. Like I've had women who they might have set up like a favorite chair or something in their bedroom. And I'm thinking about some of my clients with young kids still, so it's often the bedroom might be a no-go zone. So finding a little place where that's their space of, you know, of time for themselves, you know, that becomes the environment for that. Because I think that's really important, because so much of their contextual factors, it's always about somebody else. You know, what does the work need of me? What do the kids need of me? What are my parents, my partner, and everything else, even what I need for myself in a way, like what I should be doing. But this is a place to come back to themselves. And then sometimes it depends on the person, of course, but like actions of like journaling, which is one that, again, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but that journaling can be an example of something that they'll do in that safe space, that nurturing space that they've created. Uh, but journaling to help express, to help connect back to their self, like what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What's going on in my body? Just reflective prompts to really connect back in, but doing that through expressive writing, or for some it might be drawing or listening to music, walking in nature. But exercises, I suppose, to help come back to the self. And just one last thing, I often find that I'm teaching and supporting clients with how to do that in a way that is supportive. Because often I find when people connect with themselves, it's often in a very uh, threat-based way, like it's critical, it's judgmental, it's I should be doing this, or comparing self to someone else. So it's also helping them with the skills to be able to meet themselves in a connective way, in a supportive, soothing way.
Yeah, I think you've described burnout as sort of not a breakdown, but more of a wake-up call almost, that sort of trying to reframe some of that, that this is my mind and body just giving me some clues about, perhaps what could be done next and that sort of thing. What are your thoughts there about just how you're trying to reframe that a little bit?
Yeah, it's always a tricky one with clients. And my brain goes to sell them on, but it's not, it's not to sell them on it. It's a
Ah,
process like most things. It's just what my brain does there.
yeah.
Uh, but I think, first of all, I often like to explore, because I identified my burnout as breakdown,
Mm,
and I validate and normalize and acknowledge that relationship that they're currently at. I think it's almost like taking a pause. Let's have a look at that current relationship with burnout. That's how you feel about it. Let's look at that. What's that about? Where's it come from? How does it feel in your body to experience your burnout that way? What's happening in your body? Often it might be, "Oh, I'm really tense, or I'm really like a hot energy, or I'm curling up. I'm wanting to just, shut down." But really getting a sense of their body, just to get a sense of how that current relationship with burnout as a breakdown is showing up in their bodies, and how that then affects how they respond to it, which often is that I've got to fix it, I've got to get rid of it, I can't have it happen again, because if it happens again, I'm a failure, or whatever. Like, it's just this really threatening relationship that is not helping them move forward. So I find when you give space to exploring that current relationship with burnout and really seeing it, it helps them go, "Oh yeah, well, that's not working for me."
mm,
Like, it's so then moving them towards exploring how the relationship could be. Like, imagine, you're listening to your burnout, you're treating it like your best. Well, I don't often use that language, but a more connecting with it, looking at it, observing it curiously. I feel like that's when they can really hear the messages of burnout, when they can really acknowledge and let go of that relationship. And I don't mean fully let go, that's a process that they can get some stepping back from it, and just then really hear the messages, because often it's saying, "This is no longer working for me." Okay, what's not working? Oh, like seeing 6 clients a day, 4 days a week, which was mine, or, expecting myself to be there for my friends and family all the time, like um, expecting myself to be in the best shape possible 24/7. Like, it's just, you start to hear the messages of burnout, but you really need to acknowledge and let go of the current relationship with it, and really
mm,
understand why it's not working.
mm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a well, I might sort of interpret it in a way as there's certain motives that play behind the burnout, I suppose.
Mm.
That the burnout, uh, I mean, there does feel like a sort of a threat system related
Mhm.
motive that's been
Yeah.
activated for a long time, and
Mm.
burnout might be at the shutting down or freezing end of that sort of threat
Yes.
system activation.
Mm.
But if we're able to sort of step back slightly from that burnout and all that's gone along with it, and sort
Mm.
of kind of start to understand some of the threat protection motives that are at
Yeah.
play there, I guess, in a
Mm.
sense, and the safety seeking motives in a
Yeah.
sense too. And like you say, there's that awareness and then creating safeness, I suppose, that
Yeah.
sort of in a
Using
way.
this CFT, yeah, because I'm often using and there's two models that I'm always presenting from the CFT. It's the 3 circles of emotional regulation, and the 3 flows of compassion. But I love often, yeah, that safety, safeness is another very important, because yeah, if we stay in that safety seeking relationship with burnout, we're just going to get more burnout. Even if we recover, it'll happen again. But the safeness is such an important, to work on, to really support recovery, but prevention as well.
Some of the things that you've described there are relatively internally sort of focused or directed. So even the journaling or the walking in nature or sort of music and those kind of elements, sort of changing a little bit one's relationship to one's own burnout, and that's a process and so on. Earlier you were sort of talking about the systems and the contextual stuff and even the cultural kind of sides of it. Is there what do you suggest about women who might start to engage externally as well? And is it to do with healthy boundaries? Is it to do with kind of compassionate assertiveness and expressing oneself? What are your thoughts with how to engage with the systems and so on?
Yeah, I must say, like, my strength often lies more in the internal work, and then external, I often find a little bit more challenging as a therapist. And rightly or wrongly, I really feel like that strong internal work and really building that base of uh, being able to understand what's going on, to build that safeness, that compassionate system can then help with the external changes needed, whether that might be, like you said, setting boundaries, like, and I was about to say without guilt, but the reality is we're going to feel guilt. But being able to do it, being able to, whether that is, you clock off from work, I'm not going to check emails, or you get home, you notice nothing's being done, or it hasn't been done the way that you want to, being able to make a choice that's aligned with your needs to step back from that or engage with that assertively, whatever it might be. But I feel like that internal work really sets up for the external chefs. And even big things like stepping back from a career, taking a career break, which some do, I did, or they're forced to because of their health. They've had a stroke, they've had whatever,
Oh, mm,
because burnout, the impact of burnout can be that, can be other cardiovascular events and so many other things. So yeah, like having some of the internal work, and it doesn't have to be, of course, perfect to be able to start to make some of those shifts and changes. But yeah, for those external things, or even being able to step up, like, think about some clients and being able to have a conversation with their boss around their needs at work, like the need for flexibility or the need to have certain tasks taken off their plate, or to be able to be considered for a different task that's more stimulating. It's the internal work helps for the external changes.
mm.
Yeah.
The internal work, really creates a groundedness, a strength, a solidity, that sort of thing, a calmness, perhaps even, where people can then start to engage with the external possible changes or and so on. What are your thoughts about the woman who, still has that a bit of that drive system activation, that they're wanting to persist with their career. They're still wanting to go up the ladder. They're feeling some of the burnout, but stepping too far back from their career, say, is it doesn't quite sit with them yet. They have more they want to achieve or something like that. It's just
Yeah.
something that came up recently for me. I wondered what your thoughts would be there.
That's a tricky one, Stan. But I do have a couple of clients in mind where that was the case. And it's such an individual thing. It's, I suppose it's looking at, there's just a couple of trains of thoughts happening. One is, the importance of, like, what's that about for them, like in terms of that career progression, to find, as I think I'm an ACT therapist, so I think about that values alignment and what's that meaning, purpose, richness for them in terms of that career progression. And then looking at their health too, and what might be meaningful, purposeful, or rich there, because sometimes it's that priority mismatch, and even exploring what it means to them around taking a break or a step back. Because often there's a narrative around that will mean that I can't progress in my career, that somehow that will pull me back. And sometimes that is the reality. It might be in some industries. I'm not going to sit here and paint a rosy picture. That, there's still, certainly systems at play that don't acknowledge gap years in careers. I think there should be more of that, but but I suppose it's, and I know I'm not really giving an answer here, but it's really trying to understand the woman and where they're at with that. And I'm always about, working with them as well and where they're at and how can we, because often when they've come to see me, they're wanting to look after their health, but how can we look after your health and your career? You know, something needs to change, but how can we support both? And being realistic with that. What's the cost, age-old cost? But there's always an impact to our choices. What's the impact of continuing to climb this ladder with where your health's at the moment? Both negatively but positively. Like, what's the impact? You've got a choice to make here. Not an easy choice, but
there
a
are
choice.
difficult choices with
Yeah.
various implications and sometimes trade-offs, isn't there? And trying
Trade-offs, that's a good word.
to
Yeah.
navigate
Yeah.
one's way through all of that. The person who really perhaps is in banking and they have made it to a certain level and they have always had aspirations to get to the to a state or national job and yet perhaps some of those midlife changes have started to
Yeah.
sneak in and also their parents are kind of aging and
Yeah.
the kind of the perfectionism kind of ramps up a bit and now I'm feeling more stressed but I still want to get to that national position. I mean it's really when you
It's
think about it like that it's tough.
Yeah, and you made me think of, and it's constant in this age group as well, grief. Because
Mm.
sometimes it's the grief around maybe that won't happen, or that's not going to happen because the priority is my parents at the moment because they're both ill, they financially can't afford to get into care. So we're having to make these hard decisions. Like, part of us, the career part, wants to reach that pinnacle and it's very meaningful and important to me, but then my parents need me and there's no one else to look after them, and then we can feel that grief and loss. And often the work in as a psychologist working in midlife is grief and loss, of lots of things, but that's an example. Yeah, that
Mm.
what we expected or wanted or desired is not something that's either going to be in our grasp at all, or is going to look different, or may just take a lot longer. Yeah, there's a lot of grief. And I don't want to paint doom and gloom. There's also a lot of beautiful stuff about midlife too, but there is grief. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, so I mean I guess I sort of sprung that on you a bit, but I guess I was thinking three
Oh.
circles as you said, and how do we sort of still work towards the three circles in balance? There's the threat system stuff that we kind of alluded to and the role that plays. There's trying to also activate soothing system and to create that sense of calmness and safeness and awareness and so on. And then there's the drive system and that idea of pursuing and obtaining and achieving and that sort of stuff. And it's just well, for lots of us, I guess, it's just that's the $64 million question, really, as to how do we kind of have those three circles
Yeah.
in balance.
And I think it's like, it just made me visually just like imagining all my clients and even my own journey. It's sort of like yeah, you're kind of floating in between all of them. You know how the arrows going either way. And
Yes, exactly.
yeah, because there's just so much. You might want to drive in this direction and it is meaningful and important, but it's not what is a priority right now and what's doable within keeping myself safe in that safeness or ish, not overloading myself, putting myself in threat. Yeah, it's such a balancing act. It is. And this one client keeps coming to mind, but and her journey has certainly been this balancing act of that, and shifting and changing and molding, and career was such a, and still is, such a driving force for her. And yeah, it's certainly been a lot of inner work, but also outer changes that they've made to support all of that, the balance of the systems,
Yeah.
balance-ish. Yeah,
Balance-ish.
ish.
It's in sort
In,
of flux, isn't it? I suppose it
yeah.
depends on the
Mm.
the, the moment, and the
Yeah.
different circles can shift and change and grow and
Yeah.
shrink and move
That's
about.
it. Yeah, 100%. I love the three circles. It was such a
Yes.
beautiful, oh, loved everything that I've learned about CFT, but that was just something, and it works beautifully within this population and
Yeah.
working with them. And they really hold it very closely. And I've never had a negative feedback around it. Most have found it very useful. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
You also mentioned the three flows of compassion
Mm.
too, is the other
Mm.
part that you'll often
Mm.
deploy or something like that with
Yep.
when you're working with people.
Yeah.
Um, how do you pitch self-compassion then? Because the other
Mm.
thought I had a moment ago was that sometimes all of that trickiness just kind of
Mm.
comes along with self-criticism too. So
Yeah.
how do you sort of pitch this notion of self-compassion and where it might support
Yeah.
women in
Yeah.
recovering from burnout?
Yeah, self-criticalness is such a huge, I don't know about you, but when I started working in psychology, just in general, and just the amount of people and how critical they were towards themselves, I just saw it as an undercurrent of a lot of people. And working now in the midlife space with women, it, certainly is well, I say undercurrent, but like in their heads, it's like full on presenter, big part of them that comes up, particularly when they perceive themselves as not doing well. Anyway, so yeah, criticalness is a huge issue, and feeding that guilt and shame, or misplaced guilt and shame. But and I really see self-compassion as the antidote. I think Kristen Neff says that, antidote to self-criticism.
Yep, I think so. Yeah.
But yes, it is a bit of a, and again, I'm using this, maybe it's because I used to be a salesperson in my previous career, I was selling it. But it's never about selling it with a client, but introducing it and sharing it with them. But I often find with the women, because with the three circles, when we explore it, their compassion towards others, that flow is huge. And so I often find exploring, okay, what's that look like? Like trying to get down to those attributes of compassion, like what are they doing there? When they're extending compassion out to another. And so I suppose the way I introduce self-compassion, well, we've got the model, and there's compassion, self to self and others to self, is that it's that stuff that you're already doing, but coming towards yourself from yourself, or that other one, which is a huge one. A lot of people have, a lot of midlife women have issues with, and often more so than the self-compassion, can I say, the
Yes.
other to
Yeah.
self. Huge issue, which I discovered through your work, because I used the gifts of compassion through my burnout.
Yes.
That was the one that was a big one for me. My self-compassion was, certainly on the rocks and needed some help, but it was the other to self that was huge. Anyway, I usually use the road that is already trodden very well for the women in midlife of compassion others, to help them really see or know really what compassion to self is. But then, as you know, there's a lot of the fears, as you call them, fears, blocks, and barriers. And I love that. It's like, so it has a rhythm to it. The fears, blocks, and barriers that come up with being compassionate towards self. And so that's often the work that they understand the how through that avenue. But it's like, well, I don't deserve it, or that's selfish, or so many other people need me. I can't do this, or it just feels icky in their body because they've never done it before, or worse still, they've never received it before, or they've been harmed in relationships, particularly the formative years, in childhood, but even in intimate relationships. There's a lot of fears, blocks, and barriers that then you're working through and helping, and just a real gentle exposure to bringing compassion into self. Yeah, gentle, depending on the level of fear, blocks, and barriers. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really great. The first bit is that they are often very compassionate. So it's
Mm.
just that often it flows towards others, But that's
Yeah.
great because that's a way in. You're
Mm,
able to identify like what's happening in your body or what's happening in your
mm,
mind or what's it feel like to
mm,
be in that compassionate mode.
mm,
And maybe how can we also turn that same part of you towards yourself? So that's
mm.
really cool. And then the other bit is the gradual exposure in a way, isn't it? I
Yeah, I
suppose
often,
it's sort of yeah,
yeah, I often go, oh, it's that age-old anxiety treatment
yeah,
approach that, and that's, well, wherever there's fear of something, a lot of the women, fear of setting boundaries. I had that too, or fear of what we thought was going to be a conflictual conversation, that this person can get, shitty at me. Whatever, wherever there's fear, like gradually, you know, um, going that direction, but with those safeness skills in helping support yourself,
yeah,
yeah, in doing so. Yeah.
yeah. Yes, little bit by little bit, just
Yeah.
sort of doing things that might be helpful for oneself
Mm,
and and opening up to receiving compassion. That's
mm,
an important point too. That's
yeah.
often the hardest, I suppose.
Yeah.
We feel worried about that. We feel like we don't deserve it. We feel like it will expose us as
Mm,
being sort of weak or no good or those sorts of things.
mm,
And we try to stay strong and that sort of stuff, but
yeah.
that can sometimes just, kind of make matters worse a little bit.
Yeah. 100%. Like it's such a, yeah, all those things, yeah, echo in what I hear from clients, that especially that like at work, that I'll be perceived weak, not capable, not able to do my job if I, share that I'm struggling and I need some help or support with, some flexibility in their workload. Or yeah, it's yeah, huge, huge,
Mm,
to, because yeah, it's you're vulnerable, level of vulnerability, because not every human's going to receive that well, the on the other side. So you're really trusting, um,
that's
and
true.
trust can be a big issue. That's another one besides grief. Trust is something that comes up a lot. Self-trust, other trust, in that space of the three flows, particularly others to self and self to self. Even, well, I don't trust myself, or I
Mm,
don't trust others, and they often have very good reasons not to
mm.
trust others. Mm,
Yes, I often feel about receiving compassion. There's the personal skills and openness to receiving, but then there's also who is there, who is available, who might be
mm,
there to actually offer it to you. And
yeah.
sometimes, well, sometimes there might be people who offer it in a really helpful way, and then there's other people who try to be helpful but just kind of
Mm,
mishit a little bit, and then there's
mm,
others who might, as you say, um,
yeah.
sort of are unhelpful in the way that they
Yeah.
respond to our vulnerability. You mentioned Kristen Neff
Mm,
a few moments ago,
mm.
and it just sprung to mind. There's that tender and fierce self-compassion. Do
I think that's,
you think much
mm.
about, kind of, well, especially fierce self-compassion?
I haven't actually, to be honest, Stan, I haven't looked into fierce compassion as yet. Like when I learnt and went into compassion, and I've been focused more on this with Kristen Neff's stuff, it was back in the day, oh God, I don't know how long ago now, maybe 10 years, I started looking into compassion through Kristen Neff's work to start with, because I was seeing a lot of self-criticalness and with my clients, and then later CFT. So I haven't actually looked at fierce. It's probably only Tara Brack's work. I think she's got oh, I've forgotten her name, but radical acceptance. But I suppose
Yes.
I sort of see them on a little bit of the same lines. But yeah, to be honest, I have no idea. And I probably, not knowing what Kristen F means by fierce compassion, how that looks, I think I'm more tend to be the tender, because I have more of a cautious nature as well. I don't know if that would relate. I tend to be a bit more soft rather than direct. But yeah, I don't
Yes.
know much about the fierce compassion. It
Yes.
might be something I need to look into.
Oh, it just popped to mind because
Mm.
I spoke to Kristen on this channel
Oh,
and she sort of
that's
talked a bit
amazing.
about these concepts, but I think she might say that in some ways many women are very good on the tender side, that is
Mm,
something that feels more familiar, and that's how
mm,
we've been often brought up. And there's something in the cultural bits, maybe even that
yeah,
sort of speaks to that.
would be.
And fierce self-compassion is more the mama bear protective kind of version,
Ah,
where
yep.
we might in fact be assertively, sort of advocating for ourselves, or
Mm-hmm.
setting those boundaries, or kind of
Mm,
expressing our needs in clear ways. Fierce
mm.
is a funny word because it sounds a bit fierce, but
Yeah,
sort of sounds a little bit like something
like a
more
bear,
aggressive,
like
a bit like a bear.
a bear's
But I
soft
think
too,
it's
but not
the
going to mess with
idea
them.
is, yeah, just really tapping into
Mm,
the sort of the strength and courage and
yeah,
determination to
yeah.
advocate for oneself.
That's beautiful. And I just, and thank you for sharing that. Because I was just thinking, I wonder, like with working with people, with clients, how that might be better suited for some, like to really, like they want to jump into that fierce and that they're more of a 0 to 100 person, I don't know. Whereas someone who maybe it's more that gentle, tender compassion towards themselves to start with, that might grow into fierce or that or wherever it might grow. But I just think,
Mm.
oh, that just gives choice maybe or different ways of working, or even just noticing how you're acting on your compassion towards yourself. Maybe it is more fierce, maybe it is more tender. I don't know. I just was like, because I was even reflecting on my compassion, and at times it's fierce. It's like
Yes,
full on protection mode. You're not messing with my
yes.
boundaries kind of shit. Like, yeah, like, and I think, and it's often with people that I trust more that I know I can be completely myself with, and so I can be quite fierce with it. Uh, anyway, that's just me. But then other times I might be more tender. Anyway, it's food for thought. I like it.
Yeah, it's interesting, and sometimes it's interesting to see what a person finds more
Mm.
easily, the
Yeah.
tender versus the fierce, and then bolstering the other side. Sometimes it might be,
Mm.
uh, yeah, context specific as in terms of which way to go. But it is an interesting thought. Self-compassion can be many things,
Mm.
including something that is very strong
Yeah.
and assertive. But
And I think that it just made me think of one of those blocks, that to self-compassion is that it's, this soft, it's, like we're just
yeah, that's
being
true.
weak. And yeah, it just made me think of that in your work as just those identifying those common barriers and blocks, and that being one of them. And I certainly hear that, not so much with women, but um, yeah, yeah, probably do. But I was thinking with men that I've worked with as well. Um, yeah, but well, no, compassion is fair. Like I love, that it can be fierce. It is standing our ground. It is being assertive. It's empowering. It's courageous. It's, all these things. So having that language around it can really help maybe shape or shift that block is what I'm thinking. Yeah,
Mm.
to shift it, especially for people who have that narrative that it's soft and weak to be compassionate. Yeah.
In your wonderful blog and podcast, and
Mm.
I'll obviously have all of those links in the
Oh,
description and so on. But
thank you.
yeah, there's a real emphasis on sort of listening to burnout, or kind of honoring that
Mm,
experience, and what it might help inform us, or guide us even,
mm,
or sort of rather than fighting it. It's
mm,
you nearly said this before, but then you sort of
yeah,
stopped yourself with this.
mm,
Sort of, is it kind of befriending burnout, or
mm,
is there a different way you would
mm,
say it, and what might this look like sort of in practice in a person's
mm,
life
mm.
to sort of come alongside maybe their burnout?
Yeah. Good question. And yeah, I did start to say befriending burnout. Well, like I suppose it's my ACT influence here as well, acceptance and commitment therapy, that that developing that psychological flexibility within ourselves to be able to be present and to observe non-judgmentally our experiences. And burnout is a body, mind, spirit and contextual experience. It's happening inside of us, um, and and it does have some wisdom, but often that gets lost when we're meeting it with that threat that we talked about earlier, that this is something I've got to fix, I've got to get rid of. It's, almost like that medical model kind of thing, and it just doesn't work with something like this. Yeah, we all want symptom reduction, but that we're more likely to get that when we meet burnout in this or enact, they call it, psychologically flexible way. That so often, I suppose, in the work that I do with clients with midlife women, is that I'm often teaching these skills as well where they're not already there, to be able to be mindfully present. So I suppose befriending burnout, and I don't always articulate it that way, but like I do articulate it that it's something we need to observe, we need to explore, be curious about. So I'm often teaching them again, where needed, those flexibility skills of being mindfully present, to be able to observe, to acknowledge the thoughts, the feelings that come with it, the being able to let go of those narratives, the expectations or whatever, and being able to connect into how you want to show up to your burnout, like what's of value and importance here. Maybe it's learning to rest, or learning to build up my tolerance of distress, or spending more time with the children and less time at work or whatever, like just finding what's of value and meaning and purpose, which can help. I suppose all these qualities can help, befriend burnout, rather than see it as something I've got to get rid of. I'm not sure if that's answering the question, but it's definitely, I suppose that's what it looks like in practice, is that we're developing the internal tools to be able to experience, or to respond to burnout in a way that actually gets us out of burnout and
Yes.
prevents us from going back, because these are fundamental skills that are needed, not just for burnout, but for our mental health and well-being. Yeah.
Yes, if befriending's not quite right, it's certainly sort of stepping away from seeing burnout as an adversary, or a sort of an enemy or something
Yeah.
like that, because we end up in the struggle then with it, don't
Yeah.
we? And the more we fight it, sometimes the more it fights back, and
It's because the stress, the stresses that cause the burnout to start with, external, internal. Now you've got the stressor of burnout, so you're in
yes,
that locked, and often I suppose the way most clients present to me, it's like, I need this fixed. And we get that commonly with lots of things, and understandably. We are experiencing this horrific, and burnout is horrific, can be. And that, of course, you want it fixed. Of course, you want it out of here. Like, of course, you don't want it. Of course, you feel threatened by it. So it's often, it's a really hard shift, but it's a shift because it's, rather than fix it, we're responding to it. It's something that's here right now. It's your experience. It's not all of you. It's not going to be here forever. There's a beginning and end, but we need to change the response to it. If the response is to fix it, we're going to stay stressed and anxious and all the above. But if
yeah,
we learn to respond to it in that more flexible way, and I build compassion into it too, as well, that if we learn to respond to it in that more soothing and affiliative way, it can help us drive in directions that are more supportive and balanced of that system as well. And sometimes I do use the word befriending, and
yeah,
sometimes I use, like, sometimes with that analogy of, how would you treat a friend, or
yeah. That's good.
who's experiencing burnout or experiencing any sort of struggle, your kids, especially talking to parents with kids. God, that's always a lovely in way, because they're generally really nurturing, really supportive. No one's perfect, but there's elements of those compassionate attributes that are there, and more flexibility. Often there's a little bit more being present, there's more acknowledgement, there's more being value led. Again, not perfect, no one is. But yeah, it's a really lovely in way to help them see how we need to change the response to burnout. It can't stay as a fix it thing, because you'll just stay threatened. So many people are threatened. I have clients who've come to me, they've already gone through burnout and recovered, but they're fearful of it. They're returning to work and they're fearful of that returning. It's a common one. Yeah.
Yeah, I've become more and more convinced around the psychological flexibility notion and how important that can be to psychological well-being or well-being kind of generally, and
Yeah.
just that ability to face the next thing or
Yeah.
life difficulties as they arise, but with flexibility rather than
Yeah.
rigidness or
Yeah.
inflexibility, I suppose.
Yeah.
And you've really alluded to awareness and safeness, acceptance, tenderness and sort of nurturing, as well as this strength and courage and thinking about the internal and the external and how we kind of get the balance right there, not least with the three circles and so on. You've said you don't have to keep abandoning yourself to belong. Yeah, so for someone hearing this for the first time, what might be a gentle first step towards living that kind of truth?
Even just hear those words, self-abandoning. But like one of the things that
Yeah.
came to mind with reflecting on this question was, and I often do this with my clients, is the connecting back to what they love or did love. And sometimes they can be going back to the 12-year-old self or even the 5-year-old self. That's where that took me back to. But, or noticing when there's a smile on their face or a bit of energy, which if they're in the height of burnout, that can be really hard. Yeah, connecting back to the things that matter to you, because I feel like that's a coming back to self. Um, and I think of Brené Brown's work here, and she talks about like if we to truly belong, we need to it's around that self-acceptance, and that relationship with self first is really, really important. And then being able to show up in our relationships authentically, obviously with boundaries as well, like there's depends on the relationship, but but it starts with showing up authentically with ourselves. And I find with a lot of the midlife burnt out women is that this lovely exercise of coming back to what lights you up is just something they've never explored or never thought about, but then really crave and want. So it's a really beautiful exercise to start to gently reconnect with themselves without having to all of a sudden be authentic with everyone around you or anything like that, which is like, ooh, very confronting and not what's at all expected. But that just starting to come back to self through the things that once brought you joy, to explore what will bring, what am I connected to now? I think that one's really lovely one to do, that some, not everyone, but some clients have space and want to do.
Well, you're doing some beautiful work in this space, and
Mm.
and you're living it, which is an inspiration, really. And
Yes,
and so,
I
but
literally am perimenopause. So yes, I am living
right,
it. The
yes.
midlife and burnout, but on the other side. Mhm.
Yes, exactly. But yes, well, Shannon Swales, thank you very much for speaking
Oh,
with me on Compassion in a T-shirt.
thank you so much, Stan. And I hope that for your viewers that this has been helpful for them.